You took an interview call during work hours. You are fired. That's how my boss, Greg Turner, opened the conversation. No good morning, no small talk, just that line, sharp, cold, and already loaded with judgment. I was standing in his glass-walled office, still holding the notepad I'd brought from the morning's team meeting. My hands didn't shake. I didn't flinch. But inside, something shifted. My name is Marcus Hall. I'm 36. For the past 5 years, I've been the lead operations analyst at Turinix Systems. I redesigned our supply chain tracking, cut vendor costs by 28%, and helped land 3 of our biggest clients. And for 5 years straight, I'd been promised next quarter when it came to a raise. Every review ended with empty praise and a casual deflection. Greg always had an excuse. Budget's tight. You're on track. Let's revisit this in 6 months. So yes, I took the call. One call, 15 minutes during lunch. I didn't use company time. I didn't breach any contract. But to Greg, that was enough. Marcus, he said, spinning his pen between his fingers, like he was deciding my future. We have to let you go. No warning, no HR discussion, just like that. I stared at him. Not angry, not shocked. I knew men like Greg. They don't reward loyalty. They fear growth that doesn't center them. So I nodded. Understood. But what he didn't know was I'd been documenting everything. And inside my desk drawer was a sealed folder. One he never thought I'd keep. But I had a feeling I'd need it someday. That folder had lived in my bottom drawer for nearly 2 years. It started as a simple habit, just notes from performance reviews, copies of emails, quarterly reports with my name on every measurable win. But over time, as the excuses piled up and the raise never came, I started labeling things differently. Q2, ignored results. Client win, credit given to Greg. Verbal promises not honored. I didn't know what I was building back then, but something in me always said, be ready. When Greg fired me for taking that interview call, I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just handed him my badge and thanked him for the opportunity. Then I cleaned out my drawer and took the folder home. Because while Greg was celebrating his clean sweep, what he didn't realize was he just made his biggest mistake. He fired the guy who knew everything about how this company really operated. The next day, I made a quiet phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Someone who hated Greg more than I did, Alex Warner. We used to share an office wall before he left Turinix. Brilliant strategist, terrible poker face. Greg hated him. Why? Because Alex asked questions Greg couldn't answer. When Alex left, he told me, get out of there when you can. They'll bleed you dry. Now, 3 years later, I was the one calling him. He picked up after 2 rings. Marcus, that's unexpected. I told him everything. The raises, the fake praise, the sudden firing over one harmless call. There was a pause on the line. Then Alex said, I've got something that might interest you. Ever heard of Kelbridge Partners? I hadn't. They're expanding. They need someone who knows supply chains, vendor strategy, and internal systems, and someone who can walk into a meeting and not flinch. He was offering me a bridge, not just out, but up. Send me everything you've got, he said. I'll make sure it lands in the right hands. So I opened that folder, and I started scanning. But I didn't just send the reports. I included the final message Greg once typed and forgot to delete, the one that exposed the lie. It was a simple internal email. Greg had sent it to another manager. I'm holding off Marcus's raise again. He's not going anywhere. He's too grateful. He wrote that a year ago. He never knew I'd seen it. Never knew the admin assistant copied me by accident. I had left it sitting quietly in my email, unread, untouched, unsent. Until now, that single message carried more than bitterness. It proved intent. It proved strategy. It proved that the denial wasn't just budget. It was calculated exploitation. I forwarded it to Alex, along with 27 pages of documentation. A few hours later, I got a text. It's perfect. Sit tight. You're going to like what happens next. Meanwhile, Greg posted a team update in the company chat. We wish Marcus the best as he moves on to new things. He had no idea. 2 weeks later, I was invited to a breakfast meeting downtown with two Kelbridge executives and one unexpected surprise. It was early, classy hotel lobby. I wore my best navy jacket and walked in like I wasn't the guy who just got let go. At the table sat two executives from Kelbridge Partners, and across from them, Alex, he smiled. Gentlemen, this is Marcus Hall, the guy who rebuilt half of Tyrannic's operations while being paid like a junior analyst. The meeting was quiet, clean, direct. They'd already reviewed my documentation. They saw the internal emails, the strategies, the process overhauls, and they made an offer, on the spot. Senior Director of Operational Strategy, better title, bigger paycheck, equity. Then came the twist. We're not just hiring you, one executive said. We're acquiring a stake in Tyrannics. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a comeback. It was about to be a full circle moment. And if the deal went through, I'd have final say on which execs were kept and which ones were quietly let go. 3 weeks later, I walked into Tyrannics again, not as an employee, as part of the transition team sent by Kelbridge. The acquisition had moved fast. Turns out Alex wasn't just a strategist, he was a senior partner now, and he made sure I was at the table for everything. Greg hadn't seen me yet, but the office buzzed. People whispered. I walked past familiar desks, nodding at faces that looked both confused and curious. In my hands, a black binder with personnel evaluations, restructure plans, and a short list of non-renewal contracts. Greg's name was printed on page 3. Not because I added it out of spite, because he had no leverage, no documented wins, no team loyalty, no innovation. All the things he buried me for lacking, I'd been the one providing them the whole time. And by noon, Greg was summoned to the executive boardroom, where I was already seated at the head of the table. Greg walked in and froze. His eyes landed on me first, then on Alex, then on the Kelbridge 5P across the table. He tried to smile. Marcus, he said, like we were old friends. Didn't know you'd landed somewhere so quickly. I didn't respond. I let the vice president speak. We're restructuring leadership, she said. Your department's under review. Greg glanced at me again, still hoping for familiarity. But this wasn't personal. This was business. I slid a folder across the table. His name was on it. Inside, data comparisons between my performance record and his last 3 years of contributions. The silence was sharp. I think you should read that before the final decision is made, I said. Greg looked smaller now, because for once the numbers weren't on his side. And when he opened that folder, he saw a printed copy of the email he thought no one would ever see again. His fingers hesitated. The moment he saw that email, his own words printed in clean black ink, his expression broke. I'm holding off Marcus's raise again. He's too grateful. He blinked hard as if staring at a ghost. The VP leaned forward. Did you actually write this? Greg cleared his throat. I mean, it was out of context. There's no context where that sentence belongs in a leadership role, she interrupted, cool and controlled. The room went quiet again. He shifted in his seat. I didn't know he had access to that. Wrong move, I leaned in. That's the point, Greg. You never thought I was watching. The room stayed still for a beat. Then the VP closed her notebook. We'll be moving forward without you. You'll receive formal notice this week. Greg opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And as he stood up and walked out, I finally smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I never had to raise my voice to do it. Word spread fast. Within 48 hours, everyone at Tyrannics knew Greg was out, and that I was part of the restructure team from Kelbridge. Some cheered quietly, others avoided eye contact, but a few came up to me in the hallway. Did you really save that email for years? I had no idea you were doing all that back-end work. You deserve it, man. And that last one? That stuck with me. I didn't deserve revenge. I deserved respect, the kind Greg never gave. One of the junior analysts, Chloe, approached me with a stack of proposals. Would you mind reviewing these with me? Greg never gave her the time of day. But I did. I wasn't just replacing him. I was rewriting what leadership looked like. And just when I thought the dust had settled, I got a call from the CEO of Kelbridge with an offer I wasn't expecting. It was a short call, straight to the point. "Marcus," she said, "we like how you handled the transition. No noise, no ego, just strategy." "Thank you," I said. "We want you to lead the full integration across both companies." I paused. That was bigger than anything I'd imagined. Not just restructuring Terranix, but helping build a new standard across multiple departments, brands, and cities. More pay, more control, more reach. I accepted. And as I looked out the window of my new corner office, I thought about the phone call Greg fired me over. A simple interview, a 15-minute conversation, the same kind he probably had dozens of times when he was ready to move up. The difference? I didn't just move on, I moved past him. And 5 months later, I saw Greg again, standing in line at a job fair. He didn't see me, but I saw him. And I kept walking. It was held at the Downtown Convention Center, an industry-wide recruiting event I attended on behalf of Kelbridge. As I moved through the booths, shaking hands with recent grads and mid-level professionals, I spotted him. Greg. He was further down the hall, standing at a folding table labeled Career Services. His suit didn't fit like it used to. His hair looked thinner, and he stood alone. He didn't see me, but I saw everything. He was holding a resume folder, waiting in line like everyone else. No title, no staff, just another name tag and a hopeful smile. I didn't stop to gloat. I didn't make eye contact. I just kept walking. Because what Greg never understood was that real power doesn't need attention. Real power moves quietly and leaves the noise behind. Later that evening, I received an anonymous email. Someone from his past wanted to talk, and they had their own story to tell. The subject line read, "Terranix, you're not the only one." It was from a woman named Vanessa. She used to work in legal, quiet, sharp, and left suddenly 2 years ago. Her message was short but heavy. "I heard what happened with Greg. You're not alone. He blocked my promotion and took credit for my compliance system redesign. I resigned quietly, but I still have the proof." She attached documents, memos with her name edited out, timestamps showing her original files, Slack messages where Greg claimed her ideas as his own. Pattern, history, proof. He didn't just do it to me. He'd built a career off burying the people below him. And now, all those people were resurfacing. I picked up the phone and called Vanessa. What we uncovered next would change Greg's future forever. Vanessa and I talked for over an hour. She'd been collecting her own folder, emails, source code logs, voice notes from internal meetings. Her case was airtight. Together, we mapped out a timeline. There were at least 4 documented cases where Greg took credit for others' work, blocked internal promotions, fabricated budget reasons to avoid raises, manipulated feedback to maintain control. He hadn't just been bad leadership. He'd been a fraud in a tailored suit. Vanessa didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. So we made a plan. We didn't send it to HR. We sent it to the industry board, where Greg was trying to land his next job. With our combined evidence, the board opened a quiet investigation. No headlines, no drama. Just quiet, strategic dismantling. A week later, Greg's name vanished from the speaker list of an industry conference, and someone else was invited to replace him. Me. The auditorium was packed. Rows of executives, analysts, and recruiters, all waiting for the keynote on ethical leadership in modern operations. Originally, Greg was scheduled to speak, but the event website had been updated. Keynote speaker, Marcus Hall, Director, Kelbridge Partners. As I walked onto the stage, I scanned the room. A few familiar faces nodded. I began, "You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to step on others to move up. And you don't have to settle for silence when you've been underestimated." The applause was steady, clean, and honest. And as I stepped off the stage, someone tapped my shoulder. It was a young analyst from a startup. "You gave me hope today," he said. "I've been going through the same thing." That was it. The moment I realized this story was bigger than Greg. But I wasn't done. One last loose end remained, and it was sitting quietly on my old work laptop waiting to be opened. After Greg's termination, most of his digital files were archived and locked. But a few weeks ago, I'd received access to his old department assets, purely for restructure purposes. While combing through his drive, I found a folder marked Audit Backup, Private. Inside, old vendor correspondence, project billing logs, and cost markups. And then, one spreadsheet stood out. It showed manipulated invoice data, inflated costs on a project we did 2 years ago. The same one Greg used to justify cutting team bonuses. He hadn't just blocked raises. He pocketed extra funds by inflating third-party contracts. I printed it, verified it, logged the audit trail. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. I sent the file to Kelbridge Legal with one sentence. I think this is bigger than we thought. The response came quickly. Kelbridge Legal confirmed everything. The invoice manipulation, the backdated vendor approvals, the fake cost overruns that Greg used as an excuse to kill our bonuses. All of it. Fraud. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation, and the findings were reported to the industry's compliance board. Greg was now facing a possible lawsuit, not just from the company, but from the vendors he dragged into the mess. I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to move on. But the deeper we looked, the clearer it became. Greg hadn't just blocked growth. He'd weaponized his authority against good people, against truth. And now the truth was writing him out of the picture. 1 week later, I received a letter, not an email. It was handwritten, and it was from Greg himself. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside, one sheet of paper. Marcus, you were better than me, and I knew it. I used to tell myself I had earned my place, but you made that impossible to believe. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I wasn't angry when I saw you in that boardroom. I was ashamed. No apology, no excuses. Just the truth, raw and late. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not to keep score, but to remind myself what happens when you build your career on lies and ego. Greg finally understood what I never needed to say out loud. And just as I closed that drawer, an HR rep knocked on my door. Someone else was asking for a second chance. Jasmine, a junior analyst I barely knew, had been let go from another department during Greg's restructure 2 years ago. She stood in my office now, resume in hand, eyes hesitant. I know I don't have the cleanest record here, she said, but I've changed. I just want the chance to prove it. She reminded me of myself. Someone who had given years, been overlooked, pushed out. I didn't respond right away. I reviewed her old reports, cross-checked her last performance cycle, and looked at how the decision had been made. Turns out Greg had cut her to save his own budget line. She deserved a chance, and I gave it to her. Because rising up means lifting others, not pulling the ladder behind you. A week into her return, Jasmine handed me a file that opened an entirely new door, for her and for me. Jasmine found something I hadn't noticed, an outdated software license agreement that cost the company nearly 6 figures every year. It had never been renegotiated. She laid out a new strategy, ran numbers, built the proposal, and presented it confidently. It was impressive. At the next executive meeting, I didn't present it. She did, and she owned the room. Afterward, the CEO pulled me aside. That kind of leadership, quiet, clear, empowering, we want more of it. We want you to lead a division built on that. Not just a promotion, a legacy. They offered me a role overseeing 3 departments across 2 cities. I accepted. And just like that, what started as punishment for taking an interview call turned into the blueprint for a better system. The last email I sent that day had no subject, just a screenshot of my promotion announcement, sent quietly to Greg's old email address. I never got a reply, but I didn't need one. Sometimes the loudest revenge is delivered in silence, in steady progress, closed loops, and the sound of your name being respected in rooms your enemies can't enter. Greg taught me what not to become, and I thank him for that, because when they fired me, I didn't burn the place down. I didn't storm out or beg or curse. I documented. I moved smart. I played the long game. And in the end, I didn't just win. I rose. Now when people ask me how to deal with betrayal at work, I tell them, keep the emails, keep the proof, keep your power. Because one day, Your story will speak louder than your anger ever could.